This is the Nebraska Broadcasters Association History Project. It's a production of the Nebraska Broadcasters Association as we look at people and personalities who have made Nebraska radio and television what it is today. Today we're recording at WOWT Channel 6 in Omaha. Our thanks to Jeff Sabin for the help. I'm Neil Nelkin for the NBA. Broadcast journalists have always been among the most visible personalities in television and radio. They become an integral part of the communities they serve. They represent the broadcast station to the public, and they develop a trust with their audience that most other broadcasters really cannot equal. Today's guest is one of those broadcast journalists, a very well-known face to Omaha television audiences. During his time on the air, he was known for presenting facts and for his integrity. Helped to establish a successful news operation in Omaha over many years. Very popular with his viewers. We welcome Kerr to the Nebraska Broadcasters Association History Project. Gary, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for asking me. It's a privilege to be here, and I enjoy doing this.
We're looking forward to hearing all you have to tell us.
All right.
How did it start? Let's go back to the beginning. How did you get into this business of radio and television?
Well, I was born on a farm in South Dakota, raised there near Sioux City, actually. And one of the stations that I listened to all the time was WNEX in Yankton. You know, maybe, what, 20, 30 miles away, not that far. And so I got a kind of a sense of what the broadcasting, what you would do when you were broadcasting, how it was, how much enjoyment you could have from it. And then I went to college at South Dakota State University at Brookings, South Dakota, and I got a degree in agricultural journalism and took some broadcasting courses. And out of that, I just decided, you know, rather than writing it down on a piece of paper, I think maybe I would enjoy more broadcasting it, and that's what I did.
Where did you first get your opportunity on the air?
Yeah, it was KSCJ Radio in Sioux City. They needed somebody in their news department, and so I was hired to do that.
How long were you there at KSCJ?
Well, not very long, just about 6 months is all. And I was a general assignment reporter. And then the same people that owned KSCJ also owned KTIV Channel 4. So KTIV lost one of its general assignment TV reporters. And they got a hold of me and said, Gary, why don't you come over there and do this? And so that's what I did. And, you know, I did general reporting for them. Some anchoring, that kind of thing.
How was the transition for you from radio to television?
You know, I don't remember it being that difficult. You had to wear a suit. I remember that. You know, you had to dress a little better than you did when you were doing just radio. But other than that, I don't think I saw it as being that difficult. And
then from Channel 4 in Sioux City, you were looking for other opportunities.
Well, I was at Channel 4 for a year, and great station, enjoyed the territory from that vicinity, would have liked to have stayed there, but I couldn't make any money. I was single, but it seemed like I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I said, well, I got to go try something else. So I got in my car and I did the tour being Kansas City, Denver, and Omaha. And here in Omaha, they needed an assistant farm director. And of course, that was just perfect for me. So I was hired as assistant to Arnold Peterson. Everybody knows Arnold Peterson. I mean, you know, he's like an icon in this area.
And this was WOW Radio?
WOW Radio and TV. We did both.
And you worked with Dale Munson, another broadcast legend in Omaha.
Dale Munson and I worked radio in the mornings. I remember this so clearly. And of course, Dale, he wanted to have fun on the radio. I'm thinking I got to be this more serious guy, right? But Dale says, no, we're going to have fun with you, Kerr. And so I wore deals down, what am I trying to say? to hold my pants up.
Suspenders.
Suspenders. So I wore these suspenders, and Dale would be in the studio over here, and I'd be over here. And Dale would say, well, Gary, it's time for you to snap your suspenders for the people out there. And I'm like, oh, no. But he got me to do it, and we did it, and we had a lot of fun with it, and people out there enjoyed it.
You were a serious broadcast journalist.
Well, with Dale, you weren't serious.
When you first moved to Omaha, where'd you live? How'd you support yourself? Where'd you stay?
Well, I stayed in a kind of a rooming house here in Omaha, and of course, I was making more money then, so it was not that difficult.
You told me about a bedroll story in a city park.
Well, that was coming out of Sioux City, trying to find another job. I would, you know, I couldn't afford to stay in a motel, so I would stay in city parks. All these little towns along the way had city parks, and I would stay there and roll out my bedroll and sleep the night. Nobody bothered me. It worked just fine. And then I'd get to the big city where I wanted to interview. And at that time, you could go to any YMCA in the country and just walk in the door and shave, shower, and get cleaned up. That's what I would do, and then go do the interview. And then after that, it was on to the next place.
So you get hired at WOW Radio and Television in Omaha.
Right.
And who are the people you were working with at the time, in addition to Dale Munson?
Well, Arnold Peterson, of course.
Yeah.
Arnold was the farm director, and I was his assistant. And, you know, he was the guy that I worked with day in and day out. I would come in the mornings, 5 o'clock in the morning. I can remember trying to get up. And I'd get here by 5, and then I would have these little segments to do on the radio, farm news, farm events, farm markets, all of that. And then Dale would be in the other studio, and he'd be playing records and that kind of thing. So I would get through the morning, and then it was time to get ready to do noon news. And often I did all of the noon news. I wasn't just the market or the farm person on the noon news. I was the anchor on the noon news, so I'd get ready to do that.
And of course, this was the days when WOW Television, Channel 6, was a CBS affiliate at that time.
Yeah.
And you had some connections with the network when you did some work as well, didn't you?
Well, that was, you talking about the Iran thing?
Sure.
One of the wonderful things that I got to do while I was working for WOW Television was when the Iranian hostages, the American hostages in Iran, were released. They sent them, Iran sent them to Wiesbaden, West Germany. And so the state, because we had 3 people from our area that were among the 52 hostages that were being held by Iran, the station sent me to Wiesbaden to get that story and to hopefully get interviews with any of those 3 people. Well, I did get interviews with just one of them, and it was a telephone interview. But one of the things that I got to do there that I'd never done before was do a live broadcast from West Germany. CBS set it up so that local affiliates could do that. And it was tremendous. I'd never done anything like that before. I hadn't envisioned what it would be like, but it was just a tremendous opportunity.
These were the early days of satellite, and you were talking earlier about how satellite and microwave pretty much changed the complexion of what you used to do.
Well, it did, and it all came about in the mid-1970s when we changed from film to videotape. And of course, that in itself was a big step, because we were doing film. You go out, you'd shoot the film, you would write the story, you would get it on the air, but that whole process might take 2-3 hours, perhaps longer by the time you edit. You had to actually edit these pieces of film together with glue. I can remember seeing the guys downstairs. Oh, we got 5 seconds left. And trying to get all of this stuff glued together so that the video would fit the words that you had written. Well, with videotape, it's totally different. I mean, you would go out, you could shoot it, bring it back in, and have it on the air within minutes. And if you did have to do any editing, you did it electronically, and it was so much faster than it was putting film through a processor, for example. Along with all of that, at that same time, came microwave. A live microwave truck on site, sending a signal back to the station. So you could do a story in real time, which they do all the time now. I mean, this is no big deal today, but back then that was really something to be able to do that. And so the microwave changed everything. The videotape changed everything. It was just a big change for television news in general.
As a reporter, when you're out in the field doing a story, it helps if you have a great photographer with you. You've had some of the best.
I did. Bob Moakler and I did a lot of stuff together. Dave Hamer and I did a lot of stuff together. They were just, these were all very good photographers who knew what they were doing and were able to help you put together a story so that it made a lot of sense.
Made you look good.
Yes.
Much easier when you've got the right guy. During those days, you did a lot of work in the field. You had mentioned, in addition to the live shot from Wiesbaden, you took a trip to Normandy.
Yeah, that was a documentary. Dave Hamer and I did a lot of documentaries together. And one of them was to find an Omaha man who landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. And we found that man, and we took Dave Hamer and I took he and his wife back to the D-Day landing. And they would talk about this together, walking down the beach where he had come ashore and while we taped it. And it made a tremendous documentary. I mean, he's telling her what it was like. I mean, it was really emotional. And it just made a tremendous documentary.
You don't see documentaries on that level, especially in local television anymore today.
No, you really don't, and I think it has to do with resources. You know, if you went to a station today and and said, how many documentaries did you do this past year? I doubt that they could even name one or two, just because I don't think they have the resources anymore to be able to let people go for the period of time that it takes to put together that kind of a documentary. And back then, we had more resources. That means we had more money to be able to do these kinds of things.
You mentioned back during the 1980 farm crisis, you guys loaded up a satellite truck and toured Nebraska.
Well, you know, this was another change that happened in television that was a big deal. This was in the 1980s. And we were the first station in this market to get satellite trucks. And the satellite truck just meant you go to a location, actually anywhere in the United States, beam that signal up to the satellite, it would be beamed back to the station here. And again, you could be live, you could be real time, but now from anywhere. Well, in the 1980s was the farm crisis. And, you know, there were banks closing all over the country, farms being sold. It's really a big story in local television news just in itself. But along with that, we got this satellite truck for the first time in that same period. And management at the station said, guys, why don't you go out around Nebraska and show the people what kind of equipment that we've got, that we can do this fantastic stuff with this satellite truck. Well, this is during a farm crisis. So we would drive into these small towns, WOW-TV news all over this truck. We drive into this town and people see that and they say, oh my God, the bank has closed. And we got that all across. And we just created consternation in these little towns every time we drove in.
You also covered very intimately the presidential bid for Nebraska's Governor Bob Kerrey back when he was running in the primaries against one William Clinton.
This was 1991, and this was one of the things that I enjoyed most about my stint here and in television news in general. I got to cover a presidential bid by a local person, Bob Kerrey. So we followed him. You know, he would go to these various primary states and try to get as many votes as he could, and if he got enough votes, then he would stay in maybe the top tier, 2 or 3, you know, top people who still had a shot at doing it. And I remember we ended up in New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire, and he is losing ground. He's losing that 2nd or 3rd place that he had. He's not able to get the money anymore that he needed to have in order to continue this campaign. But he kept going. And he ended up, after New Hampshire, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They were going to hold a primary there, and I got the quote of the day. I was so proud of this. I said, Bob, if you got enough money so that you're going to be able to keep going. And he said, well, if you know of a donut sale or something else out there where we can get some money, we'll take it.
Tell me about the time you took a woman back to Ellis Island to retrace her steps.
Yeah, this was another documentary with Dave Hamer. Dave had these great ideas for documentaries, and he came to me and he said, Gary, we need to find somebody that had been through Ellis Island. Well, you're talking about somebody in their 80s and 90s. We found that person here in Omaha, Rose Breesy. And so we took Rose and her grandson, and this is another case where you get somebody to tell somebody else what it was like, and then we film it while they're doing it. So we took the 2 of them to Ellis Island, and she walked through everywhere that she had walked when she was 9 years old. She remembered it perfectly. I mean, and she's at least in her 80s. She might have been in her 90s at that time, but I think she was in her 80s. And she told him, here is what I did, here's what it was like. And we filmed it and then put together a documentary based on that. And it was more than just that. We told her story, the story of what happened to her after she came to Omaha as a 9-year-old girl, growing up, getting married, having children. I mean, it was a tremendous opportunity.
And these stories still exist somewhere, if we can find them someday.
Oh yeah, no, they do. Well, they exist in my house if you want to see them.
You also did a special about the flood that nobody really remembers back in 1952, the flood of the Missouri River here.
You know, we're having all these floods today.
Yeah.
The 1952 flood was bigger than that yet. It was water from one side of the Missouri River to the hills on one side of the Missouri River to the hills on the other side of the Missouri River. And again, this is another Dave Hamer story. We did a documentary remembering what that was like, getting together the people who experienced it at that time and getting them to talk about it. And the best part of all of this for me, and I think for Dave too, was when the '52 flood happened, Edward R. Murrow, who of course is one of the great ones in broadcast journalism period, he had been here and he had done a lot of stories from here during the '52 flood. Well, Dave found this, found the video, got, I think I'm right on this, Edward R. Murrow's wife to agree to let him use this video. So we used it as part of this documentary remembering the 1952 flood. And Edward R. Murrow is such an interesting guy. He's got this flowery voice, and he just added so much to that.
In all the stories you covered in your years here at Channel 6, you said one of the most memorable was that 1975 tornado.
Oh, yeah. Who can forget that? You know, it was just snow everywhere. And, I mean, the roads were clogged. People just left their cars. I remember 72nd Street was nothing but one car after another, vacant. People couldn't go anywhere, so they just got out and left. And it took days to get all that straightened out. But yeah, that was really a big story. The 75 snow, and you were talking about the tornado
yeah.
too. Well, they all happened in the same year, and the tornado was just 3 people killed, and you know, that's a tragedy when you have anybody killed, but only 3 people. I mean, there could have been dozens. There was an elementary school that was just swept off its foundation, and all of the kids had gotten out of there just within a half hour of when that tornado came through. And of course, it went past the hospital on 72nd Street and blew a bunch of windows out, nobody injured there. Swept down 72nd Street 2 blocks from Exarban horse racing. And the stands were full of people. And they stood up and said, wow, look at that. You know, if it had zoomed over and gotten them, there would have been a lot of dead people there.
And then went up toward where Creighton Prep is now, and up through that area, it destroyed a lot of homes.
Yeah, yeah.
In the course of your coverage, you mentioned a particular court proceeding where an insanity defense was prominent.
We got a few of these things out here, and this is one of the things that I'm especially proud of. This comes from the American Bar Association, and it recognizes a documentary that Bob Mochler and I did. I'll give you some background on this. There was, in 1977, a man named Ulysses Cribbs who walked into the Club 89 restaurant in the evening and began shooting. And he killed 1 person and injured 25 others. Well, he was a Vietnam vet, and the judge decided that he was not guilty by reason of insanity. And the community just erupted. I mean, you know, how in the world could you say this guy was insane? He needs to pay for what he did. And so Bob Mochler and I did a documentary in which we took a look at the insanity defense with the idea of showing how, in fact, a person can be insane and not realizing what they're doing and walk into some place like the Club 89 and just shoot up the place. And Ulysses Cribbs was insane. There is no question about that. He, today, I think, is still in a psychiatric ward someplace because he cannot, he might go out and do it again or harm himself, nobody really knows. But this documentary kind of said to people, you know, it's possible. And it's possible that he really was insane. And the American Bar Association recognized what we were trying to do, and that's the award. And that's the one I'm, I think, most pleased about.
The gavel from the Bar Association.
That's right, yeah, yeah.
You've received a number of awards and recognitions over your career. One was the Lifetime Achievement Award at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And I'd like to just read a little bit from Dr. Mike Hilt when he presented this to you. We watched him tell us the news of the day. We sat glued to the set as he informed us about the Vietnam War, student protests, 75 tornado, farm recessions, prosperity, growth in Omaha during the 90s. Through it all, he did it with a straightforward journalistic style, brought dignity and class to the Channel 6 anchor desk, and in recognition of his fine work over the years, presented you with the 1999 Lifetime Achievement Award. That was a pretty good honor.
You know, that was really nice. I so much appreciated that, and I remember that night so well. You know, it's nice to be recognized by people who have done the same thing that you've done or have maybe taught people, and it just really felt good to be recognized that way, and I just really appreciate it.
It was quite an honor, just one of many, including this one, from the Associated Press broadcasters, Nebraska Associated Press broadcasters, to Gary Kerr. That was a pretty important award, too.
Special recognition for your outstanding contribution to Nebraska television, and that's another one that really feels good, one that
Looks good
I
next
appreciate.
following your stint at Channel 6, you got pretty heavily involved with the Omaha Press Club.
Yeah, you know, it's my belief that a press club should be involved in presenting the issues of the day, people, subjects, that kind of thing. And so I became chairman in 1999. I just left this job within the past few months. Chairman in 1999 of the Press Club Education Committee. And the one thing that we did was do monthly noon forums involving all kinds of people, all kinds of issues. And we did that for 20 years, and it continues on under a new chairman today. But yeah, I have been involved with the Press Club for a long time, and I've really enjoyed it.
One of the ceremonies at the Press Club is the face on the barroom floor, of which you are one.
I have been stepped on many times in the barroom floor. That's another, for people who don't know, face on the barroom floor is a real honor. And it was really an honor for me to get that.
You also take a community role that nobody knows about, or at least didn't at the time, but people that live and drive through Dundee notice the flowers on the lampposts in Dundee.
I don't know where you found out about that.
Somebody takes care of those.
Yeah.
Who would that be, Gary Kerr?
Well, I used to go out and water those baskets. Sometimes I water them at 4 o'clock in the morning. I only did that for a few months. I said, I can't do this anymore. We got to start doing it later, so we did. But yeah, I helped take care of the flower baskets. That's one of those neighborhood projects that is just known all over the city, and people see it as something that's really good for the neighborhood, and it's something that I took part in for a long time.
You've been a big part of Omaha. Omaha's been a big part of you.
Well, and I've enjoyed all these years. I didn't think, frankly, when I came here in 1964, that I would still be here today, but that's the way it worked out. It's been great, and I've really enjoyed it.
Well, the plants in Dundee appreciate it as well, Gary Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Gary Kerr for his part in the history of radio and television in Nebraska. Our thanks also to Jeff Sabin and WOWT Channel 6 here in Omaha for the facilities. For the Nebraska Broadcasters Association, Executive Director Jim Timm, President Emeritus Marty Riemenschneider. For the NBA History Project, I'm Neil Nelkin.
Thank you for that.
Went very well.